What happens to our bodies after we die? The Bible doesn't explicitly say there is life after death, which does seem strange given the tremendous significance all the surrounding Middle Eastern cultures attach to the idea. Just think of the Greeks and Hades, the Egyptians and the pyramids, the Babylonians and the ziggurats, all testament to the significance of what they thought happened to the body after death. Not to mention Hindu concepts of transmigration of the souls, reincarnation, as well as Buddhist graduation to another level of understanding in life. Perhaps the Bible chose quite intentionally to focus on how to live now in the present, rather than spend any time on something intangible beyond the physical world. Maybe it simply assumed such a universal belief could be taken for granted. And of course there's the possibility that it simply didn't think the idea had any merit. The counter-argument to the deduction from silence is that there are references to the fathers, Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, dying, being gathered to their people. There is talk about spirit in various forms, which does imply something beyond the physical. And phrases such as until Shiloh comes, which are usually understood in a transcendental way. The oral tradition, however, placed and continues to place very great emphasis on the whole idea of life after death. Both the Talmud and Rambam conflate the idea of resurrection, Tchiat HaMetim on the one hand, and life after death, Olam Haba, on the other. They seem to merge them. The Mishnah in Sanhedrin, for example, talks about those who have no part of Tchiat HaMetim, of Olam Haba, of no part of Olam Haba, and then goes on to talk about those who have no part of Tchiat HaMetim, resurrection. Maimonides was accused of not believing in resurrection because he didn't mention it at all in his major halachic work, Yad HaChazakah. But instead, in Hilchot Tshuva, which is part of Yad HaChazakah, he does talk about the significance of the world to come, and about those who cultivate their souls, enabling them to continue on to spiritual levels beyond death, while others simply obliterate their souls through neglect and die like animals. This way he got into trouble with those who thought souls were indestructible, the Kabbalists who claimed that Jewish souls had an eternal life of their own, regardless of what we do on earth. Rambam actually wrote a specific little pamphlet, Ma'amat Tchiat HaMetim, reiterating his belief in resurrection. Though he couldn't explain rationally how it worked or what it was, he made up for it also by listing resurrection in his 13 Principles of Faith, where surprisingly he makes no mention of life after death. So it's possible that the two do really mean the same thing. But for many Talmudic thinkers, the only way one could explain reward and punishment, disasters affecting the innocent, why good people suffer and bad people prosper, was through the idea that accounts are settled in the afterlife. Nevertheless, the concept is difficult to explain because the Talmud itself says no human being has ever been there and seen it, only God. The Talmud in Kiddushin tells a story of how a group of rabbis saw a young boy follow his father's instructions, climb up a tower to send the mother bird away from the nest before taking the babies. He fell and died, despite the promise of the Torah for those two commandments, that obeying one's father and sending away the mother bird would guarantee long life. Some of the rabbis there responded by saying long life meant eternal life. Others wondered maybe his motive wasn't so pure, and yet another suggestion was that the latter might have been faulty. Nothing protects you against carelessness. The great Rabbi Elisha ben Abuya abandoned Judaism for Greek philosophy because he couldn't accept the idea of life after death. It's interesting that Aristotle said that one's immortality lies in one's children. Other Greek thinkers talked about the legacy of good works one leaves behind. And in our own tradition, the idea of our people continuing on into the future, and our contribution to that is a form of immortality. But these are mystical matters, not logical ones. Doubts go all the way back to the Bible itself, to Ecclesiastes, to Kohelet, who asks the famous statement, Who knows if the soul of man rises and the soul of animals sinks to the dust? Yet for all that, overwhelmingly, rabbinic opinion considers this idea to be fundamental. Some argue it's a way of coping with the long, sad history of Jewish suffering. Others say it's a way of coping with the inequalities and stress of life. Either way, the rabbinic position is one has to do one's best on earth, in the here and now, if one wants to be part of something beyond. Life after death is not an escape, but it's a culmination of what we do now. And for those who have difficulty accepting the idea, it remains one of the mysteries amongst the many we have yet to solve.